This is your host, Dub FFG, with the Fantasy Football GOAT Strategies. Welcome. It's that time again. The NFL draft has happened over this past week, and we have some winners here for you from a fantasy perspective, of course, in the NFL 2022 draft. And these are simply our top 5 by individual players or by teams, simply who benefited the most. Let's get to it. First, you're looking at Jalen Tolbert, wide receiver out of South Alabama. Now, he got drafted by the Dallas Cowboys. He's not going to be wide receiver 1, but he could be the most productive. Why? Because CeeDee Lamb and Michael Gallup are now the primary receivers in Dallas now that Amari Cooper has departed to the Cleveland Browns. Now, the jury's still out on Michael Gallup. I know he's been there for about 4, maybe 5 years in Dallas. But in that 4 or 5 years, he has struggled with consistency. He has made circus catches, but he has dropped the big time catches that he needed for big time advancement or big time plays that Dallas has needed. And even compare him to Cedric Wilson, who also was there around the same amount of time, but now is playing with the Miami Dolphins. Cedric, in 1 year of being fully healthy last season, to me was more consistent than Michael Gallup has been his entire career at Dallas. So for me, Michael Gallup is still, CeeDee Lamb is now in wide receiver 1 slot. So he's going to have to step up to be that particular wide receiver. He's going to now receive the rolling coverages toward him, the double teams more so than Michael Gallup. Again, this is why I say Jalen Tolbert, with the wide receiver out of South Alabama, has a big chance to be the most productive Cowboy receiver of this year, because he is one that gets open. He is one that is a deep threat. He's not afraid to go over the middle as well. So Jalen Tolbert is a winner from this draft, from a fantasy perspective. Next, Desmond Ridder. Desmond Ridder, the quarterback out of Cincinnati who got drafted by Atlanta. He was disappointed that he dropped lower. He wanted to go higher in the draft, of course, like everyone in the draft. But this is probably the best fit for him. Why? Because he has the greatest chance to be the starter out of all the quarterbacks drafted this particular weekend. We also say the quarterback that got drafted out of Pitt that went to the Steelers, he has the greatest chance as well. He has a great chance as well to be the starter. But again, Desmond Ridder went to a perfect situation for him to showcase his talent and take over the team and take over the locker room. Again, from a fantasy perspective, he got a great benefit for that from this past draft, because again, everything is going to go through him. He just has to beat out Marcus Mariota. Once he does that, the entire Atlanta offense goes through him. Every touchdown is going to go through him, or pretty much at least 95% of them, from throwing the ball to the tight end, to the receivers that they now have, the one out of USC that they got in the first round. Desmond Ridder, disappointed how far he dropped, but from a fantasy perspective, he should be in a great position. Next, this is the team. The team that benefited the most would be the New York Jets. Their draft was pretty good. Again, we're talking from a fantasy perspective. Now, they got Ahmad Gardner, or Sauce Gardner, from the cornerback from Cincinnati. Then he got Garrett Wilson, wide receiver out of Ohio State. Jermaine Johnson II, defensive end out of Florida State. And Breece Hall, running back, Iowa State. Those first 4 draft picks for the New York Jets definitely upgraded them in a tough division that they're in. Now, again, speaking from a fantasy perspective, what does that do for their quarterback? It helps him tremendously, but it all has to come together. I don't think it's going to all come together at the beginning of the year. I look for them to all come together more toward the end of the year. Now, by that time, will they be in playoff contention or not? Who knows? But this is definitely more of a future, maybe 2023 season, when it all kind of meshes together. These rookies have a season under their belt. And out of fantasy wise, the biggest, I say, benefit out of those top 4 for the Jets draft picks probably is going to be Sauce Gardner and Jermaine Johnson. Again, there are defensive players. Jermaine Johnson would probably have a good amount of sacks this season. So for those of you that play in fantasy football league like myself that has individual defensive players, that Jermaine Johnson would be a great pickup for you in the coming season, as well as Sauce Gardner. Even though in college he has the record of not giving up a touchdown pass throughout his entire career in college, that's not going to happen in the NFL. So he's going to be tested. So because he's a rookie and he's a hotshot rookie, quarterbacks and wide receivers are going to be really itching to get at him. So he's going to see a lot of attention. Next. Now this one I look at and say I wanted to put as the number one benefactor from the draft from a fantasy perspective, but 1 and 2 could have been interchangeable. So let's go with the one we have now. That is Jared Goff. Jared Goff is happy right now to be the quarterback of the Detroit Lions. Why? Because the receiver that the Lions picked up in round 1 was Jameson Williams, wide receiver out of Alabama. Big game, big time receiver, speedster, opens it up, hits you with the deep ball. Speed, very difficult to cover, extremely difficult to cover. So add that to DeAndre Swift, Amon-Ra St. Brown, DJ Chark Jr., then you got Jared Goff, who is the biggest benefactor of them all because he has to distribute the ball to all of those guys. Now, similar to the Jets situation, all of this may not come to mesh until toward the end of the year when Jameson is probably back on the field. I wouldn't look for him to be on the field no earlier than week 10. And even when he gets on the field for those first few weeks, don't expect him to be that high octane guy that he was at Alabama right off the bat. Why? Again, because he's coming off of a knee injury, an ACL injury. So typically those injuries, even though he will be able to play, but health-wise and let's say more toward 100%, that normally takes roughly a year. So this is a great future starting, let's say 2023 high octane offense. But again, when you look at Swift, St. Brown and Chark and that Goff has, that's still a pretty high octane offense there. But when you put Jameson Williams on there healthy, wow, that makes Detroit one of the teams to beat in that division. If not, they may take Green Bay in that aspect. So if Detroit can put this thing together within the next year and a half, they're going to be something to be reckoned with. Next and lastly, the biggest benefactor out of the entire 2022 draft from a fantasy perspective is Jalen Hurts. Why? Simply because of the trade that happened on trade day. A.J. Brown is now a receiver for the Philadelphia Eagles. Now you put A.J. Brown with Devontae Smith and Dallas Goedert, and you don't forget about the legs of Jalen Hurts. From fantasy perspective, Jalen Hurts is going to be a top five quarterback in this league because again, he's going to have a lot of one-on-one matchup with those three guys. Because even if they, let's say A.J. Brown is the one doubled, then you're looking at Devontae Smith and Dallas Goedert having good games. In addition to Jalen Hurts' threat to run. So Jalen Hurts is the biggest benefactor of the 2022 NFL draft from a fantasy perspective. So there you have it. The Fantasy Football GOAT Strategies top 5 fantasy winners from this weekend's draft. Let us know what you think. Leave your comments down below. Again, this is the Fantasy Football GOAT Strategies, Dub FFG. We'll see you next time. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube page, Fantasy Football GOAT Strategies.